I'm Jeanette Keynes from Jewelry Arts Inc. And this is Chasing and Repousse 8. I'm going to show you how to patch a hole. Everybody freaks out if they get a little hole in their Chasing and Repousse project, but I promise it happens more often than you think, and it's actually not that huge of a deal to fix. Okay. So here's the progress report. There it is from the one side, and then the other side. I think this is my favorite side. I think that's the one that I'm going to put out. But upon closer examination, I found something very naughty. I'm going to do a close-up. So what I found is a naughty little rip. See that right there? A little hole. And that came from lining a little too enthusiastically. It's definitely not uncommon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a burnisher and I'm going to press the metal back in place. I'll put a little solder in there, and nobody will ever know the naughtiness that is this rip. And here it is from the other side. It's not so easy to see until you find it right there. Very easy to get carried away and punch through. So there's a couple ways I can prevent that in the future. One is using a little heavier metal, which I didn't. I actually used, what is this, 30 gauge, which is quite thin, but I had already milled it thin because I thought I was going to do something else, so here we are. I could also not whack it quite so hard next time. That might do it. I'll show you the repair process. Can't forget the bail. So I think it's all done too. The curves are nice-ish. So pretty much I'm going to start trimming away all this excess metal, and then I can start shaping it. It should look nice, but I guess we'll find out. So I went ahead and took a 6-0 blade and I sawed away the majority of the excess metal. I didn't get super close to the wires though, because I wanted a little bit of room to file. So like I explained before, I've got a little place that I punched through. You can see it right there. You can see a little light, I think, shining through it. So, I mean, worst comes to worst, I could solder a little piece of metal there and kind of burnish it, you know, and smooth it out and whatnot. I mean, of course, I would do that on the side that's not going to show, if at all possible. But with this, I don't really think I need to. I'm going to take a burnisher and kind of smooth it over, and then I'm just going to add a little bit of solder there, and I think that's really all it needs. But I guess if I change my mind, you guys will know. Well, I'm not going to lie to you. I pressed it over a bit, but I think I am going to add a little bit of extra metal in there. I don't want to distort it too much by pressing it too much harder, and although it did close a bit, there's definitely still a gap there. Now, don't get me wrong, I could fill that hole with solder, but I want to make sure the solder doesn't kind of like bleed through to the other side in any kind of like noticeable way, which honestly, it would probably be fine. But I think I'm going to just be ever so slightly more cautious and put a little metal in there and solder that. So here's an extreme close-up. You can see right here that I burnished the area, and you can't really see the opening so much, but I feel like I just want to add a tiny little bit of metal there along with the solder, and then I'll burnish it when it's done, and just to make sure that spot is reinforced. And by the way, here's my lovely bail. I think I'm almost done filing. Maybe I'll tidy up a tiny bit more. And then I'm going to coat it with a fire coat and anneal it and start bending it. So I'm going to take a little bit of my apricot gold sheet that I sawed away from my cute little bail right here to patch this little area. Now, let me tell you something. Patching is something that definitely happens in Chasing and Repousse. So, you know, if it happens to you, don't freak out too much. Now, don't get me wrong. It can be a sign that you're hitting too hard, your metal's too thin, etc., etc. But, you know, when you're doing this kind of like, you know, serious working on metal and everything, it can certainly happen. the whole key is to think about how easily you can hide it. You know what I mean? Like, where is it going to go? Like, should the patch go on top, solder it in, you know, the side that's going to show, in other words, and then you kind of go back over that and chase and repousse a bit so that it just blends in, which, believe me, that's on lots of pieces that you've seen. Otherwise, are you gonna like do it from underneath and then polish it in there? Usually it's probably a little bit less noticeable if you actually do it on the side that's going to show, the side that's up, because then you've created a thicker area there and you can blend the edges in a bit with polishing or whatever, and then go over it with your chasing tools and stuff so that it just blends in. I think though in my case, because where my space is right down in one of those little lines, I think it's going to be easier for me to solder a little bit of extra metal on the side that isn't going to show, which I decided was going to be this side, the sort of indented side, the repoussed side, as opposed to the poofier side, which once I finished all my lining and everything, I was like, okay, I think I like this side better. So in this case, this is what I'm going to do, because I think it's better. But you know, you're gonna make that decision on a case-by-case basis, depending on your guiding principle is always like, where is this gonna be easiest to hide? And just remember, if you're not cheating, you're not trying hard enough. So here's the shape that I kind of freehanded a little bit to match the curve there. I'm gonna trim the little pointy ends just a little bit to match it, you know, a little bit better. But then I'm gonna get ready to solder. Like I said before, I'd probably honestly be fine with just a little bit of solder, but I think for giggles, I'm just gonna add a little bit of extra metal. So here is the little curve that I cut out of my apricot gold that sort of roughly matches the thing that I've got there. So progress report, I use fire coat on everything. You can see my little like half moony type shape there is fit right over where that hole is, so I'll be able to solder there. Actually, I'll point it out, because once you kind of lay it in there, boop, right there, hopefully it's not super noticeable, which is of course the whole point, which is why I didn't just like put like a square or rectangle. I want something that's going to be easy to kind of burnish and blend and whatever in with it. So even though this will be on the inside and ultimately nobody will see it, I still don't want it to look like too fucked up, you know. So even though I've used the fire coat, you still need to use flux. So I'm going to add a little bit of paste flux. I'm going to dry it. I'm going to ball up a couple of little tiny pieces of the sort of like 18 karat pink, which is normally what I use on the apricot, and I'm going to solder it. So here's my setup. I have my little like half moon piece of metal sitting right on top of the hole. I have two little tiny pieces of 18 pink solder sitting there. I also had put a little flux on there and dried it off. So now I'm going to go in there and flow it and potentially poke it a little bit so that it really presses down and fills in beautifully. All right, here goes. Well, I'm not going to lie to you, that didn't go great. It hopped on top, so I'm going to add another piece of solder on the side. Remember, this is real life soldering. So sometimes things go shitty. Now you know my secret. Okay, back in. There we go. It does seem like it takes more heat than it normally does when I have it coated in this this fire coat, I have to say. Now that was some gorgeous fucking soldering. Yay! So there's my repair. It was a success. It filled everything in, and I also, of course, took this and held it up to a bright light. That's a great way to see if you have any holes anywhere. The truth is, this is going to be on the inside, so I don't have to do a darn thing to it. Because I'm a little OCD, I probably will get in there and clean up just a little bit, just for my own happiness. But honestly, you know, we're done. And here it is from a more normal distance, shall we say, like normal people actually look at things.